So my name is Rosalio Arellanes, also known as Leo. I'm a first-year instructor here at USC. Actually, this is my first time teaching at USC. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about my background and some of the work that we are doing now and we've done in the last few months. In terms of my background, I have a background in architecture, real estate development, and construction management. So I also had opportunity to teach in LA and in Chicago. So I've been all of those different things have kind of come together to create a company that we call Uniform ARC, which should be coming up soon. There it is. Our firm is basically made up of 3 different arms. We have a real estate development arm, construction management arm, and a architecture design arm. And with the intent that all of these different components are basically made up to create efficiencies in terms of building projects. Our first arm is the real estate development arm. We essentially focus on working on distressed neighborhoods. Our first project actually, our group started in Bakersfield. We put a fund together with different investors, and we all go out and essentially buy distressed properties, fix them, design them, fix them, and put them back in the market with the intent to revitalize our neighborhoods and places where we live. Our second fund actually started in Dallas, and that's happening as we speak. And our third fund actually opened up a couple months ago in LA. We have done 3 properties in LA so far, so we are in the acquisition phase currently and also raising capital. We've done about 36 different properties with just 3 different funds. And again, that arm was developed to revitalize our sort of neighborhoods and places where we live and hopefully bring back the economy in a way. Our second arm is our construction management company. And essentially, we try to develop efficiencies between the design world and the built world. This project recently finished about 2 weeks ago, and we essentially renovated the entire property. And again, with the intent to kind of create efficiencies between builders and designers. Our design arm, basically, this project started UCLA actually under Heather Ruverge. We designed the whole project ourselves, and we actually built it with a budget of $20,000. So we designed and built this whole space. The second project is a research project that we did with Neil Denari, and essentially was a research based on looking into different patterns in which cities are developing in the U.S. especially, and then we came out with a couple of ideas on how to hopefully proceed in the future. Obviously, they're pretty crazy. The next project is a pre-manufactured home that we're developing for Malibu. The house actually is made up, the panels of the homes are actually made up in downtown LA as we speak, and we are going to build the whole project in about 3 months. We developed and planned, you see the module basically shifted in plan so you can have different views of a lake in front of this property. Second house is a house for an artist. Essentially what we did is the artist lives in this metal box, and then we lifted the box to create interstitial space underneath the box, and that actually became her studio. So she lives in the box and works underneath the box. Next project is basically in addition to a community of different bungalows, and we were asked to add a second floor to them. The first floor essentially follows the grid on the left, and the added floor follows the grid on the right. And basically they converge in our site, creating a deformation in the new housing and the new housing types. Next project is an office in Culver City. We has basically is organized with a spine that goes through the middle of the space, and then the different components are organized along that spine. And then as you can see on the right, you have the desk on the right hand side of the space. This project is a proposal. We try to reconfigure the way housing typology sort of works. Instead of having 4 different towers, we basically try to mix the programmatic elements in different towers so that you actually create different views and actually create hopefully interactions between the people that live in these different towers. So as opposed to having 1 tower for 1 house, we commingle the spaces. This property recently finished. We basically did the construction management and the design. We essentially redeveloped the entire facade. We try to emphasize the geometric conditions that the house has on the bottom left-hand side. This project is under construction, should be hopefully finished in 2 months. Basically, as you move across the facade, the panel itself thickens by the introduction to this fold in the panel. If you look at it from one side, it basically reads as solid because the solid side of the panel. If you look at the opposite side, it looks more open because of the openings in the panel. So it creates difference. This house was the first house that we actually developed, designed, and constructed ourselves. We try to use metro reality to introduce continuation of the different spaces inside the home, and then we also try to use sectional conditions on the spaces so we can create flowing spaces in the inside of the home. This project is a research project where we develop a panel system that you can actually tessellate in different ways to be able to create difference throughout a facade. We also introduced this opening technique here on the right, where you can actually cut that piece out in the site to be able to create fenestration as you move across the facade. So it's about creating difference in one panel. This project is a research project where we started plan formations and basically try to develop and copy different ways of making connections in the real world and basically overlaying different types of materials. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Should I go ahead? All right, good. So my name is Carlo Aiello. I teach a second year studio here, and there are four main things that I'm interested in. The first one is obviously teaching. But just an introduction first. I graduated from Columbia University. I live in New York 10 years, and I'm in LA since 2 years ago. So I'm interested in publishing, I'm interested in industrial design, and I'm interested obviously in architecture. So I'm the editor-in-chief of a New York-based magazine, architecture and design magazine called Evolo, which was founded in 2009 with the intention of promoting innovative and architecture and vanguard architecture. So we have 2 issues per year, and then since 2012 now we have 4 issues per year. This is the issue that is coming out now in November, which is called Architecture Cineculture. This was also guest edited by Juan Azulay, but SciArc. And the idea about this project, it's about exploring different possibilities of creating form, what is called the Cinogene, and with that, having an exploration of different aesthetics that do not have, in a sense, fear, and expose this idea of change, idea of continuation, and also adaptation. So we have here some ideas that are published from different persons that are integrating these concepts into different art forms like architecture, painting, etc. Another project that we are developing, and it's publishing right now in also November, it's a 2-volume book that it's a compilation of 300 projects from a well-known competition that we organize called Evolo Skyscraper Competition. The idea behind this book is to have 6 different chapters that that combine the different ideas that we have received in the entries, which are technological advances, ecological urbanism, new frontiers, social solutions, morphotectonic aesthetics, and urban theories and strategies. For example, this project, it's about the revitalization of a river in Indonesia that uses different kinds of filtering systems to allow for filtering the pollution of the river, but at the same time giving some open markets, etc. Another project that it's also interested in this book, it's about fragmentation and pixelation. In this case, the studies of Stephen Wolfram on cellular automata and fractals, and how can we use that kind of tessellation into architecture. Another project that we're working, everything, it's kind of like we design everything. We have our graphic design team, which is also us working at the office here in LA and in New York. This poster, it's also about the skyscraper competition, in which we have 620 projects into this little publication that we just published a couple of weeks ago. So as I told at the beginning, this is the part which interests me about publishing creative work from mainly young professionals and students. Then the second area is that I'm interested in is furniture design. In this case, this is the well-known Acapulco chair, which is an anonymous design in Mexico. So we got kind of like a client that was looking to redesign this chair using the same materials. So our idea was to create something which we call the parabola chair, which uses steel cords and recycled PVC, steel rods and recycled PVC cord to create the structure, but we want to create a continuous surface that serves as the backrest and as the seating and as the overall structure for the frame. So right now we are working on the different prototypes for this, and hopefully it's going to be available in stores in 2013. I mean, our main concerns here is how to create this continuous surface without being a huge chair, depending on the different kind of like the size of the body, and how can you have the most comfort within a very constrained space. So we didn't want to kind of like create a huge piece of furniture that cannot be located anywhere. So the other thing is that we were thinking about different ways to create the weaving. So one way would be to use that recycled PVC cord. Other techniques would be to use also steel rods on a smaller caliber. And then, I mean, some of the details here on how everything would be kind of like attached or constructed. The third part that I'm presenting now, it's a project that has been in develop. Well, we'll see. We're just going to advance now. For an open market in Veracruz, Mexico. The idea, again, I'm interested in kind of like in self-supporting structure, the same thing as with the chair. About this one, we are investigating traditional basket weaving and how can we create this self-supporting structure for an open market, for a small open market. The idea was to create three main, almost like domes, that would allow for different programs inside, and have different spatial qualities, from being a super high space to different to smaller areas, and then we'll have some backup program that it's underneath here, which in this section is not showing. So pretty much that's what I'm kind of like showing to you tonight. I'm interested in then teaching architecture and industrial design. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Biayna Bogosian. My description is on the page, so I'm going to read through this text, and hopefully a combination of slides and this text will give you more description of what I'm about. Okay. It is visible that in the last decade, our relationship with objects have become intrinsic through the development of information technologies, defining a material semiotic that has allowed for the world to become a live information platform. The openness and rapid processing of information has taken us to a place in which architecture must be fed by a multiplicity of physical and non-physical parameters, posing the question of how to develop an architecture out of its environment or environments and users, instead of as previously occupying it with an important simulacrum. The attitude replaces the idealistic abstraction of history with a materialistic concentration of the present and evoking a new site specificity of the happens. Specificity of the territories and its user. It seeks for a constantly added resolution of information that is contained within a project. It allows us to question how to materialize the cache of a set of localized information, how to curate it in a sense that allows for the user's input and relate to further social constituencies. Buildings could start to operate within open source localized constructs where the users will inform the more sustainable, highly diversified, and technologically advanced buildings. Objects designed for communication contain information that goes well beyond their immediate use and appearance. In some cases, objects like cell phones and computers exist to provide us with access to complex systems and networks, behaving as gateways and interpreters. Whether openly and actively or in subtle and subliminal way, these objects become a very crucial part of our understanding of the physical environment. As communication prostheses, these devices are capable of accelerating or interpreting the rate of our daily behavioral patterns. As designers, our goals should be to help to develop and improve these dialogues. For instance, we can start to trace and analyze various users' range of movement and utilize the vector of difference each time in geometry construction. An example of that would be designing earthquake shelters in which the material behavior of the output responds to the initial rate of displacement. Or we could allow multiple users to directly influence the geometry output. In this case, the designer needs to establish two types of variables. First type being the initial construction method, as well as degree of influence of each user. The information is hard-coded and creates the framework of the project. The second type of variables are the ones that can be modified by users. In this case, the range of each user and the population of users can be varied in each scenario. In the mix of these two bottom-up and top-down approaches, we can create a desirable and versatile architecture that functions with its localized rules. So these were done. We just finished this seminar. It was a half-semester seminar, and I'm pretty happy with the results. The history of modernism is that of a progressive distortion of place, of the emancipation of architecture from the circumstances of its immediate physical surroundings, resulting in systematic production techniques. Based on this, our built environment dimensions were cataloged in charts based on efficiency and generic conditions of use. And a material such as wood was not different to based on its anatomy, but based on its standardized external dimensions, resulting in homogeneous construction typologies throughout the world. However, now with information technology enabling us to map local and global environmental data, coupled with the advancements in digital simulation techniques and robotic fabrication technologies, we can revolutionize customization of our environment. The potential of the shared resources, software, information, and techniques when materialized is to transcend the scale of individual and independent product module to a larger scale of manufacturing and distribution processes. In this design methodology, where the design and typologies are each time subjected to different user and environmental inputs, new possibilities for a more interactive relationship with our product and environment emerges. Incorporation of geomapping and social network technology in everyday modes of communication allows collection of data not only from the place itself, but also from the interaction with the user. Applications designed based on information sharing, user collaboration, and interoperability that heighten the significance of users' input in an open source communal participatory systems enhance interactivity with the physical place. In this regard, social networks such as Facebook and Twitter that are set up based on logic of data filtering and sharing redefine today's social, political, and economical place of connectivity, posing the question of how to frame an architecture practice that facilitates participatory information sharing and collaboration where the user and environmental inputs can be integrated. If architecture's goal is to reference its environment and to be referenced by its environment, then as designers of these scenarios, we have to develop and improve this dialogue. The architect, as mediator between material and material, human and technology, has always operated across a multitude of domains at once, and with an array of strategies at hand. The digital age has only accelerated the multiplicity. Each novel tool introduced to the architect's toolbar has struck a new vector of architectural narration, and with it opened further possibilities of conveyance of concept and method. The goal is to approach a convergence of varied user inputs possible with communication devices, with computational platforms of design, with a specific focus on integrating techniques of digital and human craft and analysis into a near seamless and active coexistence. Thank you very much.
Okay. So just by way of introduction, my name is Laurel Broten. I'm currently teaching second year, and this is Brendan Muha, who is also currently teaching second year.
So this is the beginning of a project that we're working on. It's inspired by some of the issues we have come across in our work teaching second year. It's part of an ongoing conversation between the two of us about the everyday life of architecture relative to the discipline of architecture.
So second year is a kind of important point in the architecture program that sits kind of between the foundation year and the more pragmatic elements of the comprehensive building project. It's also an ideal time to investigate larger sort of disciplinary issues in architecture.
So what we just saw were some student images of sloped floors. We realized this feature again and again, and we realized we're all tapping into a kind of latent architectural desire that recurs throughout the discipline of smoothness, continuity, connectivity, flow.
Okay.
And so what happens is this desire always works its way into steps. It's discontinuous, choppy, and clumsy. Discrete bits of material, not continuity.
Right, but they're doing the best they can with what they have, in that we have a reality that doesn't actually work with slopes very well, and they become mostly visual.
And they become vacant and uninhabitable, which is exactly what we have here. The idea, the image of connectivity, a lot of wasted material, but not actually real physical connectivity of people relative to one another.
So you're sort of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But architectural history is full of examples where we have kind of failed to occupy the spaces that we can envision.
So here are two familiar examples that never got off the page, Super Studio and Banham and Delgray. But here we have Mies and the Smithsons. They understood that new types of space required new tools for living, and they committed to making them.
So you can see how the lightness and the volume of Mies's furniture and dividers allowed for the sort of uninterrupted flow of the plane of his open plans.
So,
which brings us to our own project, which developed as a kind of working architectural mythology.
This is from Homer in the Odyssey. I'm not going to have time to read it, so I'm not going to start.
Okay, and now a working manifesto.
Which will also allow you to read for yourselves.
Right, you guys read faster than we do.
It has to do with speculating on the rich sociocultural potential of inhabiting sloped floors in architecture.
And now the fairy tale. So they set off for a new land, bringing with them all their possessions and furniture.
Some old tables and 20 cents in their pockets.
Don't you have one? After a long journey, they came across a habitable place.
And 2 by 2, they began to unload onto this broad new plain. Off of the old plane and onto the new plane.
Right.
Sorry. I just saw that now.
They ventured forth.
But something wasn't quite right.
Da-na-na-na. There were problems. This broad new plane was at a 10% slope.
Nothing worked as planned. Some things just rolled away.
Even the children were upset. They had no place to sit or read or play.
Life was all work.
And even Andrea Bronzi was upset and couldn't figure out what to do. He tried to sit down and think about it, and then all of a sudden,
He lost his balance, and he and the stool tumbled down the slope.
when he regained consciousness, Einstein was with him.
And something incredible had happened. The broken stool held the answer to life on the wedge.
They quickly set to work. The broken stool had given them a new way of seeing the world around them.
If they could just break the rest of their furniture, survival on the wedge would be assured.
By cutting, bending, slicing, they became pioneers in this new world.
Little did they know this was a space of their own imagination. An expansive utopian plain, endlessly occupiable, lay before them. Possibilities were endless.
Even the stubborn Charles Eames rejoiced.
And so it went. A vast experiment in new ways of living, new architecture, new spaces, new lives.
And so I would say, in summation, the project became about making real things in the real world, models, not drawings.
Sure. For us, the models that we make aren't representations. They're actually real architecture and real tools that just operate at a very, very small scale. We're currently putting together a book and an exhibition, and we really want to thank Ashley Louie and Darl Shinsato for their help.
What?
There you go. Hello, hello.
Your turn.
Oh, okay. Hi, guys. So we'll just start, I guess, with this going because we might get behind. Bear with us. We do have a script because there are two of us. So thanks for coming. Tonight we're going to show you some images from Coco, which is the recent collaboration child we gave birth to last spring. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Colin Sieburgh. I teach first year, studio and the representation course.
And I'm Victoria Coaloa, and I teach Topic Studio, but I was teaching with Colin for the last 2 years. And I guess Colin and I, we met in 2010 when we both started teaching here at USC, and we recently launched this collaboration from a shared interest that we have in cross-disciplinary work. Oh, this is me? Okay. It's a bit confusing. Our first project, and the one that we're going to be showing you tonight, was a collaboration with many heads involved, including an amazing team of volunteers, a lot of whom are current USC students. So thank you, USC.
Yeah, big props to you guys. So we're already behind. So here are a few images of our initial studies. We looked at different ways to integrate our work, or the architecture, with the work of the artists, which was being displayed via digital projections. Along with the team, we selected the 4-foot diameter balloons as our raw material. So to create this effervescent environment, we tossed a field of these balloons, 400 of them, in the air, floating them above the crowds in a nebulous accumulation of bumps and blips. Animating this with the projected light and imagery, the musicians and artists could create a unique immersive experience for each event.
So the focus of our research is on these temporary formal systems and structures that can adapt and change in reaction to different program uses, sites and spaces. For us, this project was a way of testing some of our ideas at full scale.
Collaboration between multiple design fields is a key focus of our research. Allowing for disciplines to overlap, Coco believes the blending of architecture, art, set design, performance allows for not only a broader audience, it also has the potential to create new ways of approaching design.
So tying together all of this creative energy, these giant balloons became easily activated into a dynamic force field of hanging light, sound, and texture. Somehow, a simple familiar object, the balloon, was transformed into a very playful and ephemeral experience.
Yeah, in a way the crowds were sort of mimicked in the balloons. The configuration of the balloons was initially molded by the hills and valleys that make up the crazy landscape of Los Angeles. While reflecting the topography, this also began to pocket certain spaces and inflate or expand others.
Throughout the different events, the balloon swaying above continuously morphed the atmosphere and imagery in constant motion. The imagery was provided by a diverse group of LA artists that we collaborated with, such as Benjamin Millipede and Drew Barrymore. And I guess in one of the ones that we were short, we forgot to say that we did this for Play Mocha, a festival that happened this summer. In the spirit of this collaboration, we also designed a branding concept where the crowds were active participants in the documentation of the events. They did this by constantly snapping photos that would in real time be uploaded into Instagram and then printed on site and given to the crowds. We also...
So the rest of the images we're showing tonight are all from that active documentation. We worked with Smashbox, who was the sponsor of the event, to integrate their branding and presence into our conceptual approach to the space.
And what we did is we conceptualized and designed these what we call balloon purses containing Smashbox makeup inside that would be given as a takeaway gift for the crowds. Somehow the scale of these orbs was not only floating above you, but it was also on the ground and in the hands of the crowds and women wearing them as purses.
So while the first event, which you can see here, was a success, there were two more, and we actually learned a lot about the fragility of the materials we were working with. The balloons were all inflated on site and intended to be deflated and reused for the next two events. What we did not foresee was the environmental impact of the heat and wind on these fragile balloons.
So Jeffrey Deitch took note of this, and we were slightly in trouble.
But luckily, juice runs out now. In the full-scale charrette-like design process we were in, we were able to reassess and re-strategize for the next two events. So we modified our design and introduced a new material in place of the balloons, beach balls. So you can see here they took a little longer to inflate, though. And since installation time was a determinant factor in the design process, since the installation had to be up in 6 hours, last for 6 hours during the event, and then be taken down immediately after the event. So the effect was still achieved, and we actually benefited through the process and yielded an even better result.
So Coco's installation somehow transformed itself into the identity of the Play Mocha Festival, and it provided a backdrop for guerrilla fashion, photo shoots, Vogue blogs, and paparazzi that were snapping the crowd that was in the events.
So yeah, one thing, because we were really fast at the beginning, we have time now. This was for Play Mocha, which is at the Geffen Contemporary, downtown Los Angeles. It was temporary, but we encourage you to Instagram this as well, and re-Instagram it, and re-Instagram it.
And I guess one last thing, we would like to actually thank the students that were huge collaborators in this, and especially Lisa Phillips, that I think is somewhere in here right now. And this is Colin and I after an exhaustive, really, really fun and exciting process that lasted 6 weeks, right?
Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Frank Escher. I teach fifth year here. I've been teaching here for about 3 years now. I have a practice with my partner Ravi Gunawardena. It's called Escher Gunawardena, and we deal with. We have a very broad range of projects. On one hand, we do a lot of work with contemporary art. This is an interest of ours. It kind of reflects what Los Angeles is about. It has become one of the global centers of the contemporary art world, with very interesting galleries, very important museums, and so on and so forth. On the other end of the spectrum, we deal a lot with architectural history. This has to do with some work that I did in the past, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then the third sort of area is actual buildings. So this is a house that we did about 12 years ago. It's called the Jamie Residence in Pasadena, on an extremely steep piece of land. We built these 2 concrete towers. They carry 2 steel beams, and they carry a 30 by 84 foot house completely framed in wood. This had to do with sort of costs. This is a construction sequence. So you see these 2 towers that contain all of the infrastructure. They are reduced to 4 caissons each to reduce the foundation work, the steel beams, the wood platform, and then the wood framing. And so the house itself is organized around a series of volumes. You see this on the top left. The volumes all contain the big one in the middle, the garage. Others contain bathrooms and so on and so forth, or closets. And so the space kind of flows around these volumes. On the front side, you have what you see on the bottom left, 184-foot-long view through the house, through the living, dining, kitchen, family room, and the smaller rooms are facing the hill. There's a second house that I want to show, the Sola House, Mount Washington. 3 volumes stacked on top of each other, all of a different size. They sit sort of lightly on these concrete walls that we sort of excavated into the hill. It was a very difficult uphill site. So the foundation walls are both sort of the border between man-made and nature, as well as the foundation, the plan, bottom left entry. Middle is the middle level bedrooms, and you see on the top right, this is this canyon going through the middle level, and the library down here. The whole idea of these elements are these sort of tubes, white walls, floors, ceilings, and these elements that are sheathed in plywood that contain bathrooms or contain storage and so on and so forth. So this is at the top level, the living space, open on one side to a park, the other side opening to the city. So some of the art-related projects that we did, this is a project we did with Olafur Eliasson. He's probably best known for the weather project he did at the Tate, top left. And so the house that I showed you at the beginning, the Jamie house, this is what he proposed to do to it. A 120-foot diameter sun attached to the side of it. Now, we start working with the structural engineer on that. The city freaked out, pulled the plug. That was the end of that. He developed, he introverted the project, did it all on the inside. Sharon Lockhart, an artist we've been working with for about 13 years, project in Vienna at the top left, project bottom right, something that was at LACMA this summer. It's opening in Vienna shortly, and then, anyways. Mike Kelly, an artist we did 3 projects with, including the Münster Petting Zoo. This is 2007 in Münster. This every 7 or 10 years, it's an international sculpture exhibition. So we worked on space planning with him on this. This is a project we did with Stephen Prina at the Secession in Vienna. Basically, we rebuilt all about 20 or 30 pieces of furniture from 2 Schindler houses that no longer exist. And then he painted them in this pink, and they were installed in the Secession, and this had to do with sort of a story that he tells us about an experience in the 80s seeing these Schindler buildings, Schindler furniture. An art gallery, Blum and Poe in Culver City. This was actually the first gallery in the Culver City Arts District. Blum and Poe is actually one of the largest and leading galleries in Los Angeles. So on the other end of the spectrum is sort of architectural history. I edited the first book on Lautner, was in charge of the archive until that went to the Getty. And so because of that, we restored the Chemisphere, which is owned by Benedikt Taschen. The house was not built exactly how Lautner wanted it to be done, so we made a few changes to the house. We installed this floor, changed all the glass to frameless glazing. Other parts were sort of strict restoration, removing layers, reconstructing built-in furniture. But we made some adaptations to the house. Now, in contrast to this, to the Chemisphere, we're currently working on the Eames house. Now, the Eames house, this is a totally different project because this was obviously built very precisely, lived in very precisely, and it is one of the sort of iconic buildings of Los Angeles or maybe of the US. This is a project we're doing in collaboration with the Getty Conservation Institute. And this shows you some details of the condition after 60 years, stains on wood walls, the vinyl floor that had completely deteriorated and stuff like that. So we're treating this really in the way one would treat a painting, an old painting, and sort of doing a lot of research into how to deal with surface and so on and so forth. So in the middle you see the pre-restoration, on the right you see after the wood wall has been cleaned, refinished. We found a company that could sort of custom make the exact tile that we needed, minus the asbestos. So anyways, and I want to end with a project we're currently working on, a house which is the absolutely most difficult site we've ever dealt with. Very steep, very narrow. 2/3 of the house are underground, poured in place concrete. What you see here is the stairs going up to the entrance. The entrance is sort of this opening. Anyways, garage bottom left entrance, bedrooms on the middle level, and then the living room at the top. Because of this sort of geometry of the site, the only thing that worked there was a 5-cornered house that sort of addresses the topography, setbacks, and so on and so forth. And so once you get to the top, you have a living room that is going to be enclosed in glass on 5 sides. The roof is supported on 5 steel columns. And from this living room, you have access to this level area that you don't have otherwise. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Anthony Guida. I teach and coordinate in first-year studio. I've been at USC since 2008. We're going to talk about my practice, Lush Life LA, which is a practice that engages landscape, architecture, and interiors, mostly at the single-family residential scale. We're interested in all of those things, including houses. We're interested in practice. Practice from the sense of just doing design and getting it built, but also practice in terms of doing a lot of it, small to big, and getting better all the time, hopefully. So we're going to look at today a kind of glimpse into what's like going on right now. If you want to see a finished project, you can look at our website. This is what you would see day to day, really fast. This is a small landscape project that we're doing in Malibu for a gallery owner. It entails 3 courtyards, on a front yard courtyard, the kind of middle of the house courtyard, and then not really a courtyard, a terrace that looks out over the ocean. And this is for entertaining. A few details, kind of in-process construction. These are walkways we're growing very fond of doing. It's a cheaper alternative to doing paving or wood construction. This is actually 6x6 treated landscape timber set in the ground on rails. It allows us to grow different plant materials in between. We did this in the side yard too, and allows gravel, which is kind of midway through the photo, to kind of blend through there. This is a drought-tolerant landscape. This is also the type of landscape that we do, a very highly detailed one. This person is a gallery owner. He's working with paintings and artists every day. He's very fussy inside of his house, very fussy outside. We love that because we're able to detail landscapes like buildings. Here we did new concrete, raised the backyard about 12 inches to give a better view or overlook. We took an existing deck and made a conversation pit, fire pit, raised spa deck that conceals a inexpensive fiberglass tub. This is a fast-track project for a long-term client. We came in this summer, and the goal was to do in about 8 weeks a redo of their master suite and this really awkward area on the left, a kind of den and office area that had very low ceilings, which we'll get into in a minute. We fast-tracked this from these design drawings to engineering to permits to somebody doing demo in a week and a half. So this is the master suite on the right. We updated and got rid of 1980s luxury like the bidet and the fireplace in the bedroom. On the left, 2 bedrooms with a new bathroom in between. The trick here was raising the roof or the ceiling, which was at 6'9", to 8 feet standard ceiling, and getting it all back put together per current seismic code without disturbing the exterior, which was renovated just a few years ago. So you can see the kind of open roof. These are photos finishing up the job, the master suite on the master bath on the left, the custom casework in the office den on the right, and that awkward phase where the owners are in but the contractor is not out yet. So we do a lot of that. And I think, okay, so this is the next project, unusual for us because it's not a house. This is the old red car charging station that's on Sunset and Silver Lake. This actually used to be, it used to be the red car charging station. This is currently the offices of independent record label Epitaph. And we're doing a kind of quick redo for them, a lot of casework, getting a kind of consistent look throughout the offices, new furniture, redo their conference room, redo of all of their public areas, lounges, the entry. So this is some casework in the office area. Some reception desk, which was a challenge given the contractor. We'll see this in a bit. This was exciting for us because we got to and many of our projects are collaborations with the owner, but in this particular case, the record label has an art department, which is really fun to work with. There's a kind of history to the company. It's very punk rock. They worked with us and we collaborated on this wallpaper. These are just visualizations, but this is going in next week. So it's the old company logo. We're getting a company that does vinyl wraps on on city buses to kind of come in and install this really quickly. Some of the new casework is in. This is an exciting project that we're working on right now. This is a early 1980s Buff and Hensman house in Pasadena that's undergone a full renovation. Tom Marble, who's an architect, is doing the renovation. We're working with him on the landscape. It was a spec house that never really had a designed landscape, so the challenge was to design something that fit the house, fit the renovation, and maybe the sensibility of a Buff and Hensman residence. This is the entry court, which is a bridge over a reflecting pond, and a water feature. And then in the backyard, we're taking cues from a lot of Buff and Hensman projects that we've looked at, where we have a kind of paved land bridge that spans the yard. There's a pool in the foreground. There's a pergola structure that's new that we designed. And this is hopefully getting built soon. Also, kind of on the boards in the mix is a schematic design for a luxury villa that we did for a Chinese developer. This is the so-called topiary house. Is our attempt to integrate indoors and outdoors, both kind of materially and spatially, so we get a kind of carved volume. Our obsession with Paul Rudolph kind of shows here in our building section. We have a bridge over a dining court. You enter kind of in the middle of the house. You're overlooking the living room and the view. This is on a lake, a sunken living room below, an outdoor lounge that pushes in from the bottom. This is an interior view of the house. Maybe it'll be built, maybe not. But that's just a kind of window into what we're working on at the moment. Thank you.
We're going to right through. So my name is Eric Haas. A lot of you probably know me. I coordinate currently the second-year graduate comprehensive studios. I'm going to show you a few projects that have been recently and currently and future in the office based on our kind of educational institutional work that we've been able to do recently. First project is a preschool for St. James Episcopal Church. This is in Koreatown. An infill site. The clients came to us with the existing parking lot and said, we need a building in, this is in January, I needed a building for the opening of school, so we designed a modular building. Worked with a company that has worked with several other well-known architects. This is a kind of quick design, very low budget project, preschool for 60 children, about 4,500 square feet, working with a very kind of sort of standardized modular system with some custom, obviously, site work. Infill of the large apartment building on one side of the lot and a mini mall on the other side. Sort of our first modular building, actually a very interesting experience. This is the building already built in the warehouse out in Fontana, waiting for the site work to be done. Sort of probably about a 3-month total on-site construction time and about 2 months waiting for the LEDWP. This is, as we were waiting for the building, the kids came out and painted the building on the parking lot. Sort of a lovely afternoon of having the kids involved. Most of the adults had to do most of the finish work themselves. The neighbors were interested in that. This is the modular buildings being installed on the site. Again, sort of a conventional system in terms of the framing, but pretty interesting as well. Everything here working as a kind of commercial coach is sort of interesting to us in terms of the permitting and the way that the whole system was working. So waiting for the things to come together. This is the finished building from the front. We're still doing little bits and pieces here. The project had to open and go through a licensing program, so a lot of very quick decisions were made. Some of them not involving us as the architects. So we're going to work on fixing some things. And this is the finished building kind of interior. It's a nice relationship between the kind of interior space and the exterior you see on the left. And then the kind of hero moments in the side yard, again, sort of sunshades in colors that had to be immediately available. So not our first choices, but second project is a project we're doing for Para Los Niños, which is a development downtown. They do a community outreach and education services. Michael Maltzon's building is at the Intercity Arts is at the bottom of the slide. We're on a tougher street than his project, so basically a block off Skid Row. This is what the project used to look like. It's for the teen center, and I defy anybody to think of a color that is not in this image right here. The new project is a change of use to a community wellness center. They're doing mental health outreach programs for the homeless, including a special dedication to working with families and homeless families. So it's basically an existing brick shell. We're doing a new kind of entry and a whole kind of new interior for them. So it's a very gritty location. Security, a giant issue, but we're trying to get an interior situation that once you're past a kind of multi-layered entry sequence produces a kind of a very kind of soothing environment. There's play spaces within this for the kids while their parents are talking to therapists and so forth. So this project is in bidding right now. And then the last project, which we're just beginning, is a project for Larchmont Charter High School. This is Lafayette Park. The circle is a 1955 to 57 Welton Beckett office building that we're doing a change of occupancy and alterations for to turn it into a high school, leveraging the public facilities across the street in the park, library and Stephen Cantor's center. This is an original article on Welton Beckett's building. This is back when the LA Times published articles on interesting new structures. So thanks to Trudy for helping me find this one. So we're kind of caretakers for the building as it comes up. This is right now it's a kind of was an adult school occupying the building. That's the CNA building, by the way, next to it. Now the Superior Court, my favorite building in Los Angeles, for those of you who care. So this is an interesting building. I mean, it's really nice. Each elevation is a different facade. It's all the things that we talk about in kind of sustainability. Welton Beckett was kind of doing back 50, 60 years ago. South elevation, louver systems, some ficus trees, which if I have my way will be long gone. And we'll get into the plans a little bit. It's a high school for grades 9 through 12, about 500 students. This is the plans of really quirky building, small footprint, 2 exit stairs. Our big design move was to move the corridor to the bottom of the building across the south facade to serve as a gallery and a kind of social space, or thinking that a lot of the activities that happen in a school are outside of the classroom per se. This is the kind of core of the building, which serves as kind of ventilating heart of the existing building, and we're going to take advantage of it. We've been talking to the engineers at Arup and trying to convert some of the antiquated building systems into something that's going to work for us in terms of the new life of the building. The sort of section indicating that, we're using this gallery space on the left-hand side as a buffer from the acoustic noise of 6th Street, turning an ancient dual-duct HVAC system into one where one duct will be serving as assisted ventilation for the passive ventilation in the building and air conditioning. And just an image from the rooftop, sort of suggesting the possibilities for the school. We're really excited to begin the project from sweep from downtown on the left all the way back around through 6th Street, so it provides a heart, and we're hoping that the school will, in next year's PechaKucha, will be an interesting one to be showing you the finished one. So thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Alvin Huang. I teach in the post-professional masters here, as well as 5th year topic or thesis studios. Just started at USC this past year, or this is my 2nd year now that I'm here, although I did do my undergraduate here. So I first entered USC in 1993. And at the time, there was a distinction of people that were identifying certain offices as what they called CAD offices. So there was an era where I thought maybe I should learn the computer. And with that, I jumped into it head first and started recently an office called Synthesis Design and Architecture. We're a small practice. We believe in what we call applied research and experimental practice. These are a few tenets that kind of describe the work that we're interested in. We're going to show a few projects today that kind of ascend in scale. The first is a very small interior installation, which we did in London. Which you see above is the kind of generative diagrams, pixelized version of the structural system, and all of the sheets laid out onto plywood panels. The entire system is made out of CNC milled birch plywood with an integrated system of shelving and organizational systems, which disguise everything and keep everything kind of neat and tidy. The client's entire purpose was to have something sculptural that hid everything that he had to have in the room. What you see here is the completed installation. Up above is basically the organizational system and the desk which pulls out of that. Everything from the printer to the paper shredder. Paper shredder actually feeds between the slots. And you see the kind of detailing there. This is a pavilion which we did in 2008. It was widely published and has won numerous awards. It's a result of a competition sponsored by Fiber C, which is a manufacturer of fiber reinforced concrete. What you see here is the documents which we won the competition with. We went through a series of extensive research and material exploration where we did multiple structural analysis, which helped us design this kind of parametric sizing of the members, and developing a construction document set, which you see here, which is more like a IKEA flat pack assembly process than a traditional drawing set. See the construction assembly on the top left there, which was entirely a digital fabrication process going from file to factory, and some completed images of the pavilion here. The pavilion was intended to be on site for 3 months. It was so popular that they extended it for just under 1 year. It has since been sold in auction by Philips de Prury to an art collector in Singapore, who I have no clue if he was ever able to put it back together. Since there are no photographs, I assume he has not. This is a installation we did this summer with some students who may or may not be in here.
from the PP and undergraduate at the MOCA Shanghai. It's basically exploring form-found minimal surfaces. Because of this project, got really interested in this process of dynamic relaxation. Another student who may be in here, Banaz, was interning for me over the summer, and she did these diagrams, which we were using Kangaroo to simulate mesh relaxation processes, trying to use force to find form, defining what is known as funicular form. This sort of exercise led us to a competition which we produced this summer for a library in Korea, which is about funicular form and kind of extending the landscape through this dynamic mesh. This landscape extends into a continuous rheotomic surface, meaning it's continuously walkable, which means that there is technically no single floor, it's just a series of interconnected floors. And instead of thinking of the furnishings as something that are added to the architecture, it's something that comes out of the architecture. So between stairs, shelving, desks, seating, all of the elements are actually integrated into the sectional changes within the geometry. You see some images here of the building within context and how we look at the building as an extension of the park. So the park's landscape actually moves through the building and pulls up onto the roofscape at the top. And that roofscape provides a sort of secondary park. So you move through the building, through this kind of ascending series of interconnected spaces. Bookshelves peel out of the ground, stairs peel out of the ground, desks peel out of the ground, etc. And then you arrive at the top into this sort of roofscape, which is a kind of recreation of the same sort of patterning you see in the ground plane. Another competition we did this summer, which is for the Keeling Harbor Terminal building, which is inspired entirely by the notion of carbon fiber. And the name of Keeling is actually hen cage. So we looked at the kind of weaving patterns of these hen cages and thought of them as a sort of exoskeleton, and the notion of carbon fiber as a micro exoskeleton. And so the project's really about gradients, and about the gradient that goes from exoskin to exoskeleton. And that gradient expresses itself as a structural property, which you see in the bottom left, as an environmental property, and as a spatial property. So what you see here is more about the skin being expressed by this gradient exoskeleton, and the fenestration internally being expressed by that, as well as the sort of gradient spaces that arrive out of this. So we see here some of the exterior images that show the building in context as a sort of gateway into Keeling. This is unfortunately another part of a series of lost competitions, which we're getting really, really good at. Developing a very tough skin, so to speak, I guess. And this one's not a lost competition, more like a lost project. So this one is a project which we're doing for a developer in China. Very, very quick study, basically looking at taking the existing topography, deforming it with a series of tractor points. Those attractor points are then tied to kind of programmatic forces and programmatic attractors, and resulting in this series of twisting towers and a peeling geometry that pulls out of the landscape, which is basically integrating boardwalk with building. So there you have it.
Hi, I'm Lisa Little. I teach first year undergrad here at USC. This is my first year at USC. Tonight I'm going to talk about machines, parts, layers, and show some images from installations that were realized from these elements. All of the work that I'm showing has been done by the firm I co-founded with Emily White. Our firm's called Layer. So I'd like to start with this image. It's because it's just a mess. This is an image of a die cutting machine. I would say we are equally interested in both high-tech and low-tech machines. This is an example of a low-tech machine. This is a die cutting. It's essentially like a giant cookie cutter, and we used it to produce this installation called Fat Fringe, which was originally at a gallery called The Fix. The components are all made, components of the canopy are all made from the die-cut paper from that machine. And we had an interest in fringe as both an element within the overall form rather than just as a kind of detail within the individual part. And then this installation was selected to be in the 2010 California Design Biennial. So we actually, without having planned it ahead of time, moved this entire installation, 700 parts, into storage, and then we reinstalled the canopy at the museum. These are some images of parts. Like I said, I would talk about parts. On the top are 1,400 pieces of paper stacked. This is the original fat fringe in its most compact form before it was assembled. And then in the Volvo at the bottom, you see the elements for another canopy installation called Cloud. So there's about, I think, 1,500 translucent pieces in that Volvo. And then these next shots are of the canopy at the Skirball. This is part of the recent exhibition called Women Hold Up Half the Sky. In this installation, we used the die-cut translucent plastic to achieve a sort of 3,000 square foot canopy. And in both of the projects, we used a simple armature. In the case of Fat Fringe, the armature was a catenary curve in section and a parabolic curve in plan. And in the case of the Cloud, it was a more complex steel fabricated armature. This is another image from the Cloud installation. And back to some machines. Personally, I love to script and I love working with the precision of CNC type machines, but as I said, I think it's also interesting to push our practice in terms of using these kind of older machines and machines that are used for different technologies than normally are used in architecture. This is a radio frequency welding machine that we use for a project called Squid Capsule. And this is Squid Capsule, which was installed in the courtyard at the Materials and Applications in Silver Lake. We rented the machine, and then we produced some of the inflatable elements ourselves, and we had some of them fabricated by someone who knew how to do it better than us. But all told, Squid Capsule consisted of about 50 inflatable elements, parts. More machines. These are some images from another industrial process we've been using, which is basically an industrial brake. We've been using, the next two projects I'm going to show you, we use CNC laser cutting, the brake, and then powder coating. This is just an image of powder coating, kind of again showing the sort of old school process and the combination of old school and new school CNC powder coating. The two projects I'm going to show are Three-Horned Beast and a Loose Horizon. They both use the combination of laser cutting, industrial brake folding, and the powder coating. So this is some more parts. These are the parts from Three-Horned Beast, which is a pavilion that was built in situ at the New Children's Museum in San Diego. There are over 400 unique pieces and in 7 powder-coated colors. This is just a set of them. And even as we're also interested in machines, of course, we're interested in a lot of other things. And in terms of some formal ideas, these were some vegetables that we were inspired by as we looked at the process for the Three-Horned Beast. It was a very, very iterative process. We worked between physical models and rhino models back and forth. So that the process was sort of highly computational and also intuitive, and that was by design. That's what we wanted to do. So here are some images of the beast. The program is an improv pavilion for children. We wanted to pare down the essence of improv to its essential elements, which is basically actors and spectators. So the museum interior is a very open 3-story space, and we were interested in using the porosity of the design to allow for framed views from lots of different places inside the museum. And our goal was to have the pavilion be as porous as it could be, while obviously maintaining structural integrity. And so the structure is over 3 stories tall, and so we worked very, very closely with the structural engineer, Roel Scherbeek. And he became a kind of fundamental part of the design team. And again, we went through an iterative process with rules so that we were sort of building physical models. They were collapsing on the desk. He would come over and look at them. We would talk about what to do differently, and he would take the models we were building into Rhino and analyze them structurally, and then we'd build more models, and they would generally collapse a little less until we got to something that was buildable. But he was absolutely a fundamental part of the team. Okay, and so then this is the last project I want to talk about. There's some more parts, obviously getting into the parts thing here. This is a Loose Horizon, which is currently installed at the Pasadena Museum of California Art. And while we use similar machines and processes as we use for the Beast, we were interested in using an even thinner aluminum, and we were interested in still folding it for structural integrity, but at the same time, the shapes were very thin and long, so they would start to curve and curl a bit. So on the left, you can see a loose horizon projecting from the opening at the second story of the museum, and the opening serves as a frame for the view outside and represents a horizon or a boundary between the interior and the exterior, working with the potential of lines to shape space. So we compose a series of rays projecting from the frame to expand the visual experience into a spatial one. And this is the final slide, so thank you.
So Lisa was a student of mine at SciArc, so I'm feeling a little old right now. Cool work, Lisa. Okay. Hi, I'm Aaron Neubert. In addition to teaching studio, I direct my own design office, Annex. My practice has primarily focused on both designing and trying quite hard to get as many projects built as possible. And also doing a little speculative on the side. I'll share some of those works with you. This this talk's entitled "I Like Monsters More Than Aliens." So what do I have? So what do monsters have to do with architecture, and what do I have against aliens? To begin with, what interests me about monsters, and specifically the characteristics that have found their way into our work, is that monsters are supernatural, unexplainable, and potentially dangerous. Yet they are of this world. To be honest, I don't have a problem with aliens per se, as they are a scientific evolution of monsters. However, aliens are from another world and lack a connection to humans, while monsters typically relate to humanity in some fashion. Either through a failed experiment, an evolutionary mutation, or a biological disaster, monsters tend to exhibit exaggerated features. These mutations typically are expressed in a hyper-utilitarianism aimed at the creature's survival, yet contributing to its continued exile. Additional physical mutations may affect the creature's skin, fur, or clothing, incorporated to reveal, and in some instances conceal, the monster's emotions. External appearances typically expand the depth of understanding of the backstory and narrative trajectory. Monsters may exhibit an integral and systemic relationship with their physical environments. In some situations, the creature deploys cloaking and camouflage strategies to minimize its visual presence. Conversely, the environment may be altered in the creature's likeness. Attack of the killer mushroom. This is a proposal for KCRW's Sonic Trace mobile recording booth. We were interested in creating an object both familiar and foreign, one with ambiguous associative potential. The system consists of die-cut felt people icon patterns representing LA's diverse population. The felt patterns are arrayed to create a cylindrical space on the interior, accommodating 2 to 3 occupants. The felt acoustically insulates the recording area while allowing light and shadow to be transmitted between the interior and the object's temporary environment. In addition to the associative projections, physical transformations by the contributors to the Sonic Trace project are inherent in the object's tectonic. Entering the interior consists of parting the felt elements as if stepping into a wardrobe. Contributors will have their names embroidered into the felt, altering the object over time. This is a current project, the Hub Studios, a creative professional community centered around the music industry. Cables supported dichroic glass skin, transmitting an array of colors to the exterior, wraps the exterior to create the deep skin and commercial program of the ground floor acoustically buffers the recording spaces. Organized around an internal void that bundles the communal spaces as it carves its way up through the center of the building, the project terminates in a conference room and terrace. The intention of the void will act as a thermal chimney, passively cooling the communal spaces. In addition, we're developing an installation within the central void. It's a mutant caterpillar. It's titled Off Target. The work consists of malformed rockets embedded with LEDs. These rockets will be programmed to respond to environmental stimulus and alter their appearance, color, and intensity. This is our proposal for an opera house and park in South Korea. It's located in Busan, South Korea's largest port, and the project site consists of reclaimed land from the sea. Straddling the line between land and water, our proposal looks to mediate the port functions with the developing recreational activities. Due to that interest, we looked at shaping the entire landform to divert and accommodate pedestrian and vehicular traffic around the proposed opera. The creation of these terrains references the adjacent geography, acknowledges the reclaimed nature of the island, and reinforces the free and open access to the coastal edge. The Opera House, multi-purpose theater, and accessory programs are housed in 2 converging volumes. Each volume is wrapped in a deep skin of layered bands containing circulation, mechanical, and support spaces, as well as exterior terraces. These bands are stitched together at the points where the volumes intersect. The lobby, the byproduct of the converging volumes, contains the public programs and extends to the various recreational, commercial, and entertainment landscapes forming the island. These landscapes bridge to the mainland, creating a continuous loop with the developing entertainment activities. This last project is a residential work that we've been working on for some time. The original property consisted of a 1950s post and beam house, which is not shown, on a peninsular-shaped lot with the street wrapping around it. Due to the site conditions, the only practical location was between the house and the street. The husband said, "Cut it down," the existing tree. The wife said, "It stays or I go." So you see, we built that house around the tree. Crosshairs of steel I-beams intersect at the moment where the tree penetrates the roof. Capturing the tree conflates interior and exterior. The waterproofing for that wasn't difficult enough, so the owners asked us to build a second story on it. So you can see here where the tree exits the second floor, passes through the exterior wall and onto the roof deck. And then in the middle is the contractor, who is a real monster. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Eric Nulman, and this talk is not about vampires or werewolves, but about the immaterial spectacle that occurs at the twilight hour. And I've identified 3 contributing factors that produce this effect: ephemerality, light filtering agents, and color-saturated spaces. Now, while nearly all architecture is physically static and built to last years, decades, or even centuries, its appearance and perception is dynamic, shifting within minutes, hours, or days due to the changes in light levels from climatic and atmospheric conditions. This effect is most prevalent at the twilight, when the color and quality of light go through rapid and dramatic changes that eventually disappear. The visual effects seen in the sky around sunrise and sunset are produced by interactions between the Earth's atmosphere, including airborne gases and dust particles, and sunlight, producing a full spectrum of colors, each with a different wavelength. When the sun is below the horizon, the sunlight has more atmosphere to travel through, and the longer wavelengths become visible in the sky. Now, while the source of the light typically captures our gaze and our focus of our attention, the twilight effect's ambient luminosity reveals a visible atmosphere that's expansive and enveloping with color. Now, I've been exploring different ways to manufacture this effect through artificial light filtering members. The first was through a curtain, which I commissioned from a designer to produce ephemeral, immaterial effects. Now, when the sun angle is low, the direct white light shines through and it overpowers the color. But when the sun angle rises, the direct light is blocked, and the curtain produces a color filter, washing the room and its occupants with color. Now, I've looked at a few architectural case studies and tried to learn from Saint-Chapelle 2 things. First, that direct light was necessary to go through the filter membrane, in which in this case it does not. And then second, that the surfaces need to be receptive to the light wash. In this case, they're too dark and ornate. Now, the Don Bosco Sanctuary produces the effect that I was looking for with this immersive blue hue that saturates the space and its interior surfaces through the stained glass curd wall and white marble floors, similar to my red curd and white painted walls. Now, one of the things I skipped it twice. One of the things I like best about the fog bank installation, which was one of my early studio installations, was how the appearance quickly changed at twilight. In this small gallery with the overhead skylight, the white light from the sun washes or is overpowering from the color filter membranes on the side. But at twilight, it slowly changes into immerse kind of the environment with the pink and magenta hues. Now, the design was focused on the surfaces which received the light wash and to make the visible immaterial. Now, at the Cologne Cathedral, it produced an alternative effect to Don Bosco, in which it had special effects rather than a uniform all-over effect. And the colored light shadows became an ephemeral ornament for the interior surfaces. Now, here the filter and effects are equal subjects of observation. Now, my Night Flowers installation performs similarly with primary and secondary effects, a subject for observation and an ornament for atmosphere. And through this project, I learned how the spatial relationship between the light source, the filter membrane, and the environment light-catching surfaces produced the desired effect. Now, the tectonics consisted of these colored multi-layer filters to create a purple and a blood orange different effect. And the canopy served as both a filter membrane that allowed light to pass through it to create the saturated environments and to also reflect off of it bright white lights from down below. And each family had a different reflective quality and also a different color. Now, the isolated lighting effects were targeted to produce spatial zones of intensity, and with the lights situated both above and below the canopy to wash to the courtyard spaces with different layers and qualities of lights. Now, last summer I got to visit the Sagrada Familia, and I got to experience the twilight effect firsthand, where, as you can see, they're now replacing the clear glass windows with color filter membranes, and you can see the added color ornamentation on the neutral stone surfaces. Now, the windows here produced isolated special effects similar to the Cologne Cathedral, and as you can see, I'm sold on the experience. Now, upon my return home, I looked to apply this color ornamentation onto the surface of my home, exterior home, and so using color glass louvers as a material tectonic, whose color pattern will later be designed for isolated special effects, and a custom paint mix with glass microbeads to reflect the light and capture the color. Now, I'm utilizing the constant changing sun path to vary the ornament's pattern and intensity throughout the day, and here that you can see the effects on one summer day from morning to evening, front, side, and back. Now, the transience, temporality, and intensity of the twilight effect can perpetuate our interest in its spectacle. Although the color-washed twilight environments might be overwhelming, if permanent, they remain desirable when experienced temporarily and without commitment. Now, my research has been on both the immaterial effect produced and the tectonic material object that generates the resultant atmosphere. Thank you.
My name is G.Goetz. I've been teaching structures here for a while. And the structure I show you today is one which I'm particularly fascinated by because the form is very defined by the structure itself. In other words, the stress and the forces acting, and it really defines the form of these kind of structures. And there are basically four types, namely on the left, subtle shape, wave shape, arch shape and also point supported shape. But in each one, there are many different possibilities, as we will see in a moment. And there are also 3 different edge conditions, namely edge cables or edge arches, which would be in compression, edge cable in tension, or edge beams, which would be subject to bending. And depending on the condition, either one of them would be kind of more appropriate. And then again, the philosophy we saw a moment ago. On top is actually the very first structure, which was designed by Otto in 1953 already. And then below is one we did at UC Berkeley in 1967. And both of those are examples of edge cables, which would be, of course, subject to tension. And here are a few examples of edge arches or edge rings. And they are, of course, subject to compression, which is not quite as efficient as subject to tension, because there's also buckling involved. And then here are some examples of edge beams, which are, in a way, structurally the least efficient, but in many cases, like in this case, they have a great advantage because they allow the structure to be assembled in groups, which would not be so easy possible by edge cables or edge arches. And here are some of the first examples of subtle shapes where, of course, again, are different forms possible. They could be square or hexagonal or triangle or whatever. And they can also be made either as a cable net or as a fabric, which is anticlastically curved. Here the one which I got first involved in 1964 in Lausanne, Switzerland, which were basically subtle shapes, and they were symbolized kind of sailing in Switzerland, and it was kind of an experiment. We actually learned from our own mistakes how to change them, and then eventually put a cable net there to reinforce them. As you can see on the right side, it's a cable net because we tried to first do it with only fabric, and it turned out to be not strong enough. So it was a very simple way to attach the cable net. And here some wave shapes on the lower right is actually one which was one of the first one I did by computer. And it was a time when the big multi-million-dollar campus computer at UC Berkeley had 120 kilobytes, not megabytes or whatever. And the other one, of course, very close by in San Diego, which is an example of subtle shapes, wave shapes, and actually supported by flying buttresses to prevent any mass coming down to the ground, which is quite a fascinating design to create a totally open space. And a very similar one, the Denver Airport, also designed by Horst Berger, an old friend of mine, which is also a wave shape, but which is also a very good example. What is good about this structure, they provide natural lighting, which we will see right in the next image. Natural lighting to the inside, and it's a very good filtered kind of light. So this is one of the greatest advantages of these kind of structures. The structure are actually also very good for a place like Los Angeles for earthquake because they're very lightweight. They only weigh about 1 pound per square foot. So the seismic force would be very, very minimal. Here are some examples of arch forms. They can be simple or triple or double or whatever number of arches can be assembled to create the forms. And here's an actual examples of them. These were some of the very early examples I did already many, many years ago in New York and in Detroit. And again, we had to learn a lot by just trying to build them and then figure out if they hold up or not. This is a much more advanced one in Munich, Germany, which is actually a cable net supporting a translucent fabric and everything supported by a gigantic arch spanning about 300 feet. Here's some point support. Actually, the one on top left is actually one could never do because that would be like a needle sticking to the fabric, of course, would break it. So one has to have either radiating cables or ring cables or whatever, or loop cables. These are all examples how one can make these kind of art shapes feasible out of fabric. And here's one of the very simple examples I did quite a few years ago in Northern California, which has an open top and actually a double fabric because the stress increases, of course, towards the top. So we use double fabric to make it strong enough. And what's also interesting, it's actually a one color, white color, but done by projecting different light, and you can generate different colors. This one, the German pavilion in Montreal, which is also a point-supported example, assembled out of many individual panels which are prefabricated in Germany and shipped to Montreal. And this one here, the Millennium Dome in London, which looks like a arch-supported structure, but these are really cable arches which are supported from gigantic masts, designed by Richard Roger, which is quite kind of fascinating, the way he made a dome which looks normally like a compression element, but made out of cables. These are all individual cables which are supported from the outside, from the masts, and then create the anti-clastic curvature in between.
I don't usually need a microphone, but I use one tonight. And now for something completely different, because I'm not an architect. And I've been teaching here for about 4 years, or they let me in for 4 years. They don't quite know what I'm doing. I'm an engineer by trade, or supposedly. I get paid for being an engineer. I get paid for teaching here. I teach environmental systems. I help 1 or 2 students with MBS and their Ph.D. thesis. So I'm pleased to be here tonight. I've often been criticized about taking the mickey out of architects, and I'm not going to do it tonight. You know, the question you have to ask for the architects is not why, but why not when they want to come out and do things. And I've been very lucky of working with some pretty good architects around the road. But I think they're fantastic. I think they're just pretty good, you know. One of the things we look at is we've got this thing called the epidermis. The epidermis being the skin of the building. With my good friend over there, Pavel Getov, we've done quite a few of these. The hypothalamus is actually the thing which in our body controls our thermal comfort. So what we start to engineer is if we can engineer the epidermis, the outside of the building, then why do we need to condition the building? Because what we can start doing is looking at the building to fit the environment which it's going to be in and how it's going to affect the people in the inside of it. Here's some of the environments. People always ask us, because we come from California, that we know nothing about different environments around the world. If you actually look at the environment through the USA, you can see that it's splattered around. So China is no different than actually parts of New York. Here are some of the buildings I've been lucky enough. You know, we've got the Pearl River building. We've got the one down HOK, which is Cedar Sinai, Will Brudder, and we've got Randall Stout, some of the museums. Again, we specialize, because museums, you know, one of the other presenters looked about light, how light interacts. This is the epidermis again, and how we're going to use this. We got a long association with morphosis, with Tom Main. We got Shanghai, we got Giant Interactive. The middle one is Skidmore, Owens and Merrill in Saudi, and then we got the Fair Tower. We've just won another competition in Shenzhen with Tom. So again, we're going to be doing something different. We're going to start moving the facade out. Glazed buildings. Why not build a total building out of glass? If you look at the total thing, the Title 24 where we are in California, ASHRAE 90.1, it says you can put 40% glass in the facade and that's it. These 2 buildings show you can do 100% glass buildings. Both of these are in Hong Kong, by the way. We haven't been sued yet, so we're doing quite well. On the left-hand side for you is Co-op Himmelblau, Wolf Bricks. He wanted a clear building to be able to see through it. And again, on the right-hand side, we got the Randall Stout building, which is in Virginia. Again, both of these are in very cold and warm climates. So the temperature is about 30 degrees or 30, 20 degrees in Akron, and the other one in West Virginia. Why do we simulate? Because it's very easy. What we'd love to do is actually construct the building, get it wrong, demolish it, and start again. Gets rather expensive, tedious, so we have to rely on simulation. But how good is simulation? What are we actually doing? We're starting to get into real cyberspace now. You know, we're getting to compare with Rhino, whatever's going on. Here's something else where we're engineering. We're going to go back to the epidermis now. This is again with Pavel. This is engineering the outside of the skin. So we get the skin to start being responsive. So on the left-hand side, it can open up and allow natural daylight in or passive heat into the building. And when it gets too warm or too cold, then the building wraps itself up like you put a jacket on. Here's something else we do. Look at this. This is a fully integrated space here. Try and spot the mechanical system or even the electrical system. So we don't like it going around to be a showpiece for the Sheet Metal Association. What we try and do is decide something where you've got it. Here the actual space is conditioned from the ceiling with a radiant ceiling. The air comes in. Here's some of the other museums. On the left is Akron, on the right-hand side is in Groningen when I was in the Netherlands there. Again, try and spot the horrible sheet metal ducts. You can do it. You go to a museum to look at the artwork. Most of them actually go for functions of bar mitzvahs these days, but anyhow. So when you go there, what you shouldn't have to look at is a big ugly grill set up on the wall, which is there. Unfortunately, some of the architects, this is Geary, just because he's got CATIA, thinks that I don't have to draw with a straight line. So when we start looking at some path diagram from CATIA, it gets somewhat complicated, but inside the complicated mold, we have these rectangles. How does it perform? We come back again of getting that whole building to work in one. There is some really great fun stuff. We won this competition. This is Incheon Airport. This is, 6.8 million square feet. We got living roof. We got air going through there to dynamics. We've got everything, radiant floors. You imagine, this is kids' paradise. They could die in this thing. This is great. If only we get paid for it, it'd be fantastic. So the next thing is when you build something like this, what about the energy? What about the responsibility we're trying to do? So we're looking at CO2. One of the things we're trying to do is push down carbon neutral. AIA 2030 when we're going to get down here. So even with a building like this, we got it some of the reason I think about 65% lower than what a normal energy building would be for an airport at this time. Look at other spaces we've got. Back to Geary again. You've got so much being developed with CATIA, with all the Rhino and all the different stuff, which is fantastic. And I see some of the things here. Previous speakers have showed some fantastic things. Will it work? How do you actually get it? How do you transform that from this spirit that someone's got and bring it in there? Rather than just say, well, we put two radiators against the wall and you get a bit of sheet metal work. This is Vinoli. This is in Claremont McKenna. This is brilliant. I actually got this as an engineer. If you look at it from structures, you guys, this is a glass box, literally. The structure is glass. It breaks every rule you can ever think of. Title 24. It's got more than 40% glass. It's got no structure in there. Will it work? Of course it will. We haven't been sued yet. One of the other courses I do here is 418, natural ventilation. I am sick and tired of architects, bless your heart, forgive me for saying this, with the blue arrows. The air goes in here, across the ceiling, out the other side, round the other side, and all this. And I get these buildings, it's like, look at what you're doing. There's a program called Vasari. Put it in Vasari. This is where we're coming to in the modern world, integrated design, when we start looking at natural ventilation. We are looking at natural ventilation in Asia, in Malaysia, in China. Look at the photovoltaic, look at the whole integration, rainwater harvesting, and how you present this, how you orchestrate everything, basically what we've heard from the previous speakers tonight, all in one, and we bring it together. This is the future. This has been around for a number of years. Artificial neural networks. You can actually get a computer to emulate the human brain. So how much time will it be before we actually have this carrying out actual thoughts for us and actually designing system? It's actually quite frightening. I think Big Brother might take over and design the whole thing for us. When we come down here, this is one of the last things we do, the 420 meters in Taiwan. Kids Paradise, turbines, everything else we got in there. But like I say, engineers are really good. They like numbers, but they're slightly more lively than accountants. Thanks very much.
Okay, welcome to the one who arrived late, and thank you for staying for the one that are still here. Two more to go, guys. So I'm Olivier Touraine. I'm teaching studio, sometimes grad, sometimes undergrad. Where am I teaching next? I wanted, maybe I can dance. I'm going to show you a kind of a bunch of projects pretty much when I've been told that I have no other choice to do this PechaKucha today. I just actually. So that's something coming from New Jersey. Actually, the water you see is probably frozen by now. That was like a week ago. But I love this one. It's like, I don't believe in global warming because it's a belief, as we all know. That's a project. We got some AIA awards after 11 years. Not to get the AIA after 11 years, but to finish the project after 11 years because of budget cuts that we did with Arup. It's a visitor center in nearby Big Bear. Actually, to practice architecture, you've got to be extremely patient and endurant. By the way, at the AIA, there was like Warren was gone, but actually there was like AIA did USC did pretty well with Warren and well, somebody else did pretty. Yeah, Lorcan, thank you. Yeah. So what I've been doing since September, well, I had a tough summer stuck in Paris for 2 months with a bunch of students. And actually, when we came back, we say, well, you know, we've got to pretty much, since I'm creating my new practice, so Studio Touraine, we've been cranking on these competitions in partnership with Laptop. And actually, I have to say that all those projects wouldn't have been possible without the unlimited contributions of USC students, by the way. So this one is a museum of underwater antiquities in Athens, in Peru. That's just a kind of copy of the boards where pretty much the museum is coming on top of a silos building that we have been kind of mata-clarking in cutting big holes in it and actually putting the museum on top. So there is this kind of rebirth experience where you enter from the ground level through the escalators that bring you to actually this kind of lobby where there is a kind of antique copy of a boat hanging there. We worked with Arup as well on this one. Sorry, I'm with IB most of the time. I'm okay. Actually, there was a lot of things where we had this kind of working on grey water and all kind of having water dripping on green walls and actually kind of treating that in a dry dock that were just a side of the building. We have the result in 2 or 3 weeks on these competitions. I don't know if we get any awards. We might be paid in olive oil. I don't know. That's actually, I just wanted to just show the sequencing this way. Those are actually the dry dock that are actually what we do the phyto treatments of the grey water. That appears to be as well an aviary. And a lot of recreational area all around this building. So you can see there how the existing concrete structure from the 50s is just kind of exposed and playing with graphics, or you have those kind of incredible events with sculptures of actually elephants, and a kind of the possible use of this upper kind of entrance atrium during night and day. That's it for this one. So it's a diesel. Okay, so not every building is architecture, and sometimes architecture is not a building. In a moment of madness, I've been kind of deciding in August to work on a fashion line. I'm great chance to have a sister that is in the fashion industry. Actually, Monica is here. If you don't like the color, you talk to Monica after. But actually, we've been working on 4 typologies of T-shirts that are under fabrication in an undisclosed location in China as we speak. Undisclosed because I just don't know where it is. So actually, we have 4 typologies. It's a fast one. Gothic, Japanism, and in fact, the idea was to have a continuous line, a thin black line. So that's the favorite from Monica, that the 70s, right? That's your thing, the 70s. So pretty much you will know when that will be available. And actually, since I seems to be really appreciate moussaka and olive oils, we did a kind of a second competition in Greece as well, this one in Crete, which is actually a school for European kids of civil servants that are based in Crete. Well, this one is actually really kind of a plant. We've been lifting the existing topography, talking about olive oil. It's in olive tree fields. We've been kind of lifting the existing topo and working with the very thin concrete slab, which we're folding, and it becomes the receptacle of a grid of olive trees. So it's kind of pretty much the topo is totally on pilotis and lifted and detached from the ground. So that we finished like 10 days ago, and I swear to not to do any more competitions until next year, which gives me just 2 months latitude. So that's actually one of the building we finished a few years ago. And I thought that alphabetically I would be almost the last one, so that was a good way to close the door. That's actually a private residence in Minneapolis. And pretty much now it's at Scott to wrap that up, right? Thank you.
Fabulous, guys. Okay. We are slightly off kilter here, I guess. But B plus U, my business partner and myself have been doing practicing for probably about 10 years, I guess. This is sort of the accumulation of a lot of the sort of ideas that we've been going through and developing along the way of our development of architecture. We went into this phase of going from the line to surface to volume for quite a while, actually, in this sort of billowing sort of architectural language of architectural character. And it's typically based around very, very pseudo-pragmatic elements. So it's very, you know, to a certain degree sedate on the inside of a lot of these things, but it was always wrapped in sort of an exuberant sort of envelope, an exuberant sort of skin itself, you know, trying to relate to the to environment, the site itself, though, too. Creating large halls in the middle of this. This is a bit of a crazy project of Type A Performing Arts Center, just like your typical performing arts center down the block is. A lot of the issues, though, that we had with this language was the idea of openings and the idea of you know, how to get creases and apertures into a project. And so a lot of this ended up being a problem with changing the entire language in order to get an opening in a building. I mean, it sounds like a pseudo-idiotic thing, and perhaps it is. But, you know, this was an issue with this sort of language that we had developed at this stage in our architectural career. So we started looking at, okay, well, what are other ways of basically developing a language for apertures and language for windows? And by the way, this title was called "How Not to Do a Window" is the title of this lecture, though, too. That was blank at the bottom. But in any case, so this is our version of a typical housing structure. This is a housing competition in Lima, Peru, that we unfortunately lost. And it's, again, on the inside of this is actually a very sort of Le Corbusier sort of interlocking unit. But we were really looking at, for this, the idea of aperture and the idea of extending the aperture a little bit like Lisa was doing, and blurring the outside of what exactly a window is. There's a sort of an extroverted one of these apertures that sort of, you know, pulls out from the building and not only pseudo envelops the outside sort of characters of these balcony areas, but it also sort of blurs the edge of the actual building itself, though, too. So from street level, it's something different. From the urban level, it's also, the idea was that it also bends and moves with the air and moves with the sort of weather patterns, etc., though, too. So it's a sort of swaying, like a crazy hula girl or something in that nature of sorts of working with the environment around it, though, too. It's a very shell, again, it's sort of like an A-B sort of a shell. These are the ones that extend out, that go, form the balconies themselves, and again are of some silicone-ish magic material of sorts. And again, the color diagram shows the interlocking relationships of the outside and inside. And it's actually fairly well worked out, actually, on the inside of the housing structure. It just happens to have an unusual sort of skin on the outside of this thing, though, too. But it's actually a fairly working thing. Like Alvin, we're getting very used to losing competitions. And this is also another one that we've recently lost, although supposedly we had made it into some other form of a second round, which I kind of don't believe some of the jurors that have told me that, but in any case, it is a harbor, Kinglong Harbor. As again, Alvin sort of explained this one. It's a luxury cruise liner harbor in the northern edge of Taiwan. Again, we're looking at apertures, though, mostly on this. The idea of developing space that not only you're framing, what you're looking at, but also it's controlling and modulating the sun, the sky, etc., though, too, and then it happens to form these nice spaces to hang out while you're waiting for your boat. So. The outside of it has this grand sort of park that goes along a boardwalk that goes back into Keelung itself, and then again, these are just giant sort of apertures that form the terminal part. This is a sort of a complex set of rules that we had to deal with as far as security, and it was a very interesting sort of program because it's much like an airport and developing sort of how to interlock space without and still maintaining security and still maintaining sort of spatial relationships, though, too, et cetera, though, too. So this is a recent thing that we've been working on that we just finished, which is a lamp donated to the Mac Center. Again, looking at aperture and the accumulation of apertures, etc. And we obsessively went through a LED sort of light configuration, but it's also about sort of the digital technology, 3D printing, and the translucency and changes of color, etc. And I think that is the last slide, guys. You have made it through.
So hopefully you all join us. There's a reception outside to get some libation and snacks. Thanks again, guys.